Hi everyone. It's after lunch, I know how it feels. So, I'm Alan McCleave, here from Wallbox. I've come to talk about from sort of dealer side of things. I used to work in the leasing industry, worked with dealers for many, many, many years, and I appreciate in all the conversations I've been having, it's a transitional time. So we're going from petrol diesel, everybody knew inside out, back to front, going to EV, which all seems very exciting, but then causes a lot of concerns around change and revenues, and are we going to be servicing them as often? And from my recent service bill, doesn't seem to have gone down. So anyway, that's going well. So, but this is about how can you utilize EV and what are the other sort of extremities. And I appreciate some of you probably already be exploring some of these. So for those bits, big tick in the box for you guys for that. But there may be other areas that you haven't thought about, or just kind of looking at a bigger roadmap of bits you can look at going down the line. So it's not necessarily a let's do everything at one time, but it's just more what revenue opportunities are there, what are the different models within those spaces, and what are the profit opportunities within some of those, because they vary, depending obviously quite often on sort of risk. And if we start on the EV charging, it's the bit obviously I know best. And if you look at the B2C model, so the customer's coming in to you guys, they're saying, hey, I want an EV. Hopefully they're not on the top floor of a block of flats, or if they are, they're at least freehold. And obviously they want to start on this journey if it's their first vehicle. And charging's certainly going to be in their mind somewhere. So there's different models here. There's a traditional one that most OEMs kind of start with is they come and do a deal with somebody like ourselves. They'll then come to you and say, right, our standards are this, so somebody comes and buys your car, you offer them this charge point package, and you push them off to Wallbox. Wallbox tell them all about it, Wallbox arrange the installation, they pay Wallbox, or it's included in the car, or whatever that kind of model is. That's the referral model. So you're saying, okay, Wallbox, you handle that, and in return for a successful sale, you get a referral fee back. Pretty simple, relatively low risk. How much information do your sales guys need to know about EV charging? Probably not a lot. Might help the process if they know something, but I guess it's just kind of satisfying that customer's need of, I need somewhere to charge it, help. So that's kind of one side of it. Then there's kind of the lead generation side. So this is perhaps more of a hybrid model, but where rather than push down from the OEM, you now as a dealer group or as an independent dealer, you go, well, actually, thank you, Mr. OEM, I don't need your deal because I wasn't getting anything out of that. Maybe the referral fee was going to the OEM. Actually, I'm going to have a control of this now. So as a dealer group or whatever, I'm going to do a deal. It will meet the OEM standards, and the standards are probably going to be minimum 7.4 kilowatt, whatever it might be. But you're now going to take control. So you're going to do a deal with Wallbox, whoever it might be, and now you'll get that money directly paid to you. So model one, referral, the referral's typically going to the OEM. They might share it, they might not. Lead generation is just a step along from that of you take control, you decide on what standards you want or the customer journey that you want, but now you're getting that referral fee paid directly to you. And you can negotiate that and decide how that one works. The last one, and the most profitable one, and as I say, this may be a progressional thing of through the two models I've kind of just spoken about, is the full control model. So what's different about this? Well, you're still having a conversation with an installer or charge point manufacturer or both maybe, but now what you're doing is you're putting together a package for your customer where you're saying to them, okay, Mr. Customer, this is the customer journey we're going to take you on as XYZ dealer group. But more importantly here now, you're actually getting a slice of that revenue. So you're getting some margin on the installation as well as the hardware. So whereas previously you were just getting a referral fee or not a referral fee on the very first one if the OEM's taking that. So there you can see the increments, and the reason the green bars increase slightly is because basically the profit per sale goes up for you. So the last one of those, the full control, there's a level of you might have to hold stock, or you may get your installer to hold the stock for you. So there's more risk involved. The first two models, there's very little risk, but now the customer journey sits with someone else, and therefore as a result, you're getting more or less margin, long and short of it. So in terms of EV charging, that's kind of almost the step through of options that you have. I think any dealer group's been at base one. Some of you may still be at that base one when the manufacturer's telling you this is what you do. As I say, step 2 is a marginal move along from that. Step 3, it's a bit of a wider stride. But again, it depends on how much of that revenue that you want, or how much of the control on the customer journey, more importantly, that you want. Because don't forget, if you take the OEM's design the customer journey, that may or may not suit you. You may decide, actually my customers are telling me they don't like that. I don't want to deliver it that way, I want to deliver it this way. So there's a sort of thought process that goes through that. The next bit is now about EV charging. So the OEM standards move along a little bit. So in the early days, they were just saying, yeah, put some chargers in, 7 kilowatt, 11 kilowatt, 22 kilowatt, which was super complicated, and I've seen different manufacturers go through some confused thinking phases, where in very early days, everything was 22 kilowatts, because the cars then were charging at that. Then everybody pulled it back to 11 kilowatts. Now you're sat there going, well, I've got 22 kilowatt chargers, why did I get those then? But here, you've got 2 options. So you've got to meet the standards, and on an operational basis purely, you have a need to charge your customers' vehicles after a service, or when you're first delivering it to them, of whatever % of charge that you're going to deliver that car back to your customer. So the bare basic level, purely operational. That could be on-site, could be a separate site of yours where you're doing the prep of all the cars and that sort of stuff. So I've seen different groups do that in different ways. If your sites are in a particularly busy place, and I'm guessing most of them probably are, there is a possibility of what's called a CPO rental model. So in other words, where a third party will say to you, we'll pay for the charges at your site because we really like where it is. But obviously that brings with it a flip side of that. They'll say, and I want any of my customers to be able to access that, which at some of your sites you might go, yeah, that's great, because that's a potential customer to come in and look at my cars. Other sites that are more operational, busier, or you've just got less space, you might think, oh, that really doesn't work for me. So you'd have to find a balance on that. So some sites will work under that model, and some the CPO won't consider. I can tell you that for nothing. They'll just look at the site and go, it's too far out the way, my customers won't come and look for you there. So that's another consideration, but it's something worth exploring. The other side of it is about bringing EV into your dealership, and it's a step on from the operational piece. So you've got these chargers. OEMs are now moving into the DC charging, the rapid charging, and they're starting to say, right, we want 50 kilowatts, we want 100 kilowatts. Some instances, they're going bananas, and yeah, we'd really like to put 350 kilowatt chargers in at your site. Whole new world with that one, and if anyone wants to talk about that, we'll talk about that back over on the stand, because obviously there's not many cars can charge at that pace right now. But the point is with the DC, again, there's an operational need, because now with DC you get a more consistent charge rate. Doesn't matter about the model as long as it's not a plug-in hybrid. It just means that you can add, on a 50 kilowatt, you're adding 150 miles in an hour onto that car. So for a test drive or whatever, it's just a quick turnaround versus the AC chargers. But the next elevation of that is, okay, so I can turn my customers' cars around quick enough, but now what's my utilization? Because I've just spent £20,000 on a DC charger, and maybe you're using it constantly, maybe, depends on your throughput of cars. Maybe you're actually finding that you've just shelled out all that money and actually you're using it 2 or 3 times a day. Not great utilization. So the question there is, what else can you do with that? Could you say to your customers, come in, you can use it, there's a fee for that, and I'll touch on that in a bit more detail in a second, to get that utilization rate up. Again, it's going to depend on your site, how much space you've got. Again, some will suit it, others may not. I know for some of the brands out there, like Audi as an example, they're using what they call their high power charging network to try and sort of compete with Tesla, so that customers can come onto your site and get that 350 kilowatt or whatever the speed is charging. But again, they were picking certain cities, not everywhere. So it's again an ability to monetize something you're having to invest in anyway just to meet the standards. So again, you just got to think about, okay, how do I make this work? Do I just do it for my customers? Or do I actually want to use it as a conquest? Do I want to open it up to other EV drivers? Because whilst Alan comes in and his ID4 and parks up, Alan's got to do something, right? And Alan's going to wander into the thing and go, oh, what next EV shall I buy? And then you're into conquest and stuff like that. So that's another consideration of how wide you want to make that. Do you just want to make it your local customer base? Could do. It's a good loyalty touch, and it keeps that touch point. But then again, you're looking for those next customers that are already tuned into that technology. It's not a difficult sell, because guess what? Alan already drives an EV. You don't have to convince him to drive one. He's only going to buy one. So, you know, it's kind of using those types of opportunities. And I guess looking at this slide, it's kind of just looking at the journey. You're already selling the cars. That's box ticked well and truly, and you're getting more and more of those. If we ignore the fact of how long it takes to get them. But anyway, we talked about the EV charging. So your customer comes in, most of them it's first time around. They need a charger. So again, we talked about that. That's an easy second stage. The OEMs have tended to mandate it anyway. It's just, again, how can you make that work for you? Then you've got things, and I haven't touched on this one, so energy partnerships, and I'm starting to see more and more of the OEMs now starting to get into bed with people like Octopus or OVO and people like that around time of use tariffs, because again, you've bought the EV, you've got your charger, now you want to work out how the bloody hell can I avoid paying 35 pence per kilowatt? How can I get it for 10 or 15 pence, which some of these brands are offering? And again, you can get referral fees. You don't have to do the selling, but you can partner up with people like that, and if your customer wants that package. And in terms of you look at conversion rate, you're taking a step down. So if you start an EV charger, you'll get a pretty high conversion rate. Most of your customers will want that. If you start coming down to energy packages, that conversion rate drops, because it's a point in time. If they're in a fixed package, it doesn't matter they're buying the EV today. They can't change their supplier for maybe another 6 months. So there's an opportunity there, but that could be around timing. But it's another interesting thing to explore. Then we talked about that EV charging, the control. So you've got to meet these standards, you've got all these chargers on site. How do I now monetize that? How can I link that? Do I need to put my capital investment in it, or can I find a third party that might invest in and pay for it for me, and then I get a revenue share? So it's different risk and rewards on those models depending on what appetite you have. Then we start moving into that public charging space. So now you've got these chargers, you can publish them on maps. That's really easy to do. It costs you nothing. You become part of a wider network, and that can then channel traffic into your dealership. Or you become a standalone charge point operator, or CPO, under your group name, and maybe across several sites you have your own little network for all of those customers in that network. So they'll find it on a map, you give them the relative access points or payment types or through a loyalty program or whatever it might be. So that then brings them back in. So you don't see them maybe for 18 months for their first service, but actually you've seen them several times along the way because they've stopped in for a charge, maybe not at the site they bought the vehicle, but maybe they're up in Aylesford and that's where they happen to be and you happen to have a site there. So again, you can use that. And then when you start to explore that model, then it moves into things like subscriptions. Because if you've got enough of a network to offer to that customer, and your fleet customers, very interestingly, now you've got a bunch of people that are interested in charging, and now you can start to package it up. Because you can start to say, hey, you can charge at any of our sites through this program, you just need to pay us X amount per month per driver, and we will give you access. And if you think about that, it sounds like a lot of things. And as I say, you'll be doing some of these anyway. Some of the chargers and installation that you're being made to do. So what I'm focusing on here is not whether to put chargers in or not. It's about how can you make that work for you. Rather than just tick a box for whichever brand, it's about, okay, how do I make sure, I'm looking at my stats and I'm only using it 10% of the time. That's just madness. That's a lot of investment for not a lot of return. So what you got to do then is go, well, if I'm not using them 90% of the time, how could I do that? Is my site suitable? Have I located them in a space where they're available? They're all question marks, and that will vary from site to site. But if you just think about your sites and where your security gates are and which land you own or don't own, that would lead me to have a thought process where I'm going to put them. Because I might decide, well, sitting them inside my security gates is crazy because come 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, they're shut. No one can get in. But if I could sit them outside that, bear in mind a big, robust DC charger, why would I not do that? As long as it's sensible and people could park there and they can't trash anything. All sort of considerations. But these are all different strategies. So rather than just follow what the OEM wants, it's kind of have a wider thought process of like, okay, let's just think about this. Where do I actually want them on my site that people can access? Because the difficulty is, as a charge point provider, if I go to a site and do a site survey, first thing I find out is where's the power source. So the power source is wherever. It's out probably near a workshop or something like that. Cheapest install in the world is as close to that as possible. That doesn't mean that's where it's best for you. So you have to be careful because you go, well, I want to meet the standards and I want to pay as little money as possible. And I get that, but be really careful because you could box yourself in from the early days and then a year down the line when you go, oh, I want to do that thing, and then you go, I put them there. No, that doesn't work. So again, it's just trying to have a bit of a thought process and don't let people push you into going, oh, no, we should put them here. You want to push back on this, my site, and I want them here. So again, there's sort of different opportunities on that. And these are just sort of some of the examples that we've done and the different kind of bits of what I've just talked about that we've worked under. So we've worked with Ecoplex and Mazda in Ireland. Again, that's a referral scheme. So the dealer refers the customer out to Ecoplex. Ecoplex talk to the customer, do the site survey at the customer's home. They sell the package, the dealer gets referral feedback. Nice and simple. We've got the deal with Iberdrola and Mercedes in Spain. So now you've got the energy package and the charging package as a joint thing. Again, dealers referring that back to Iberdrola. Iberdrola do the sale, referral feedback to dealer. Those ones pretty straightforward. And then the last one, we say Fisker, and we're doing this in North America and in Europe. Fisker have decided, if you think of the 3 steps that I gave you earlier on the charging, they've gone to step 3. They've said, no, screw this, we're Fisker. We want the customer to have this journey. This is what we want them to do, the experience that we want them to have. So Fisker are storing the chargers, they're dual branded, so they're Wallbox and Fisker branded. So now Fisker is going to be on every house of a Fisker driver that buys a car. And they see a wider value in that because it's a new brand. And if you don't put it out, and I mean, there isn't a Fisker dealership. So that's a tricky one until people see lots of Fiskers on the road. And then they go, oh, what was that? So they've gone down a different route, but equally they know that means more money back for them. So what they're seeing is, I want to control the customer journey and I want a share of that. Thank you very much. So again, it's just sort of sharing how different brands are approaching it in a sort of different sense. So I don't know, anyone brave enough to ask a question? Anything I've not covered, or? Gentleman at the back.
Thanks, Alan. Can you talk a little bit about the grants that are available for the installation of charge points on a forecourt at the moment?
Yeah. So in terms of OZEF right now, B2B is the side of charging that they're really supporting. The home one's gone a bit wonky and they are sort of supporting it, but they're not really. So if you're living in an apartment, yes, you can get a grant as long as you're freehold or as long as you have a friendly landlord. So, but on the B2B side, you'll definitely get £350 per charge or per socket that you're putting in. So if you're putting in a dual socket unit, you'll get 2 times 350. There are also infrastructure grants out there as well that you'd be able to get. So even if you don't, so let's say you put some ducting in and you're going to put 2 chargers in today, you know you're going to put more in the future, and you run ducting for another 3 in the future, and you put some wiring down it and you cap it off. No charges there, but at some point in the future, you will get money for those 3. So there's probably more money out there than you realize, and per limited entity, you can have up to 40 grants. Now, bear in mind, when this goes, and bear in mind the government have been pulling back from these grants, it won't be there anymore. So when people say to me, yeah, but it's only 350 quid, it's like, yeah, but it's like, you don't have to pay for it. And when it's gone, you'll moan that there's no 350 quid anymore. So whilst it's there, I would be taking it personally. And if you're in a group structure, and let's say you've got 10 limited entities as part of a group structure, That's 10 times 40. So that is potentially a lot of money. And it's not difficult to do the application. It's an online application, takes about 10 minutes to fill in. You get a digital code sent back to you, hand it to your installer knocks it off the bill. Really simple. It's the easiest grant I can think of getting right now. And I would be, if you're not already, I would be filling my boots. The problem is, if you've already done the installs, I'm afraid the bad news is, no, you can't go back and ask for your money back. It doesn't work like that, I'm afraid. You have to get the grant approved before you do the install, get your code, give it to your installer, he cracks on, he does all the paperwork. OZEF might pay him back in 6 months' time if he's lucky. You don't have any of that grief. So it's the best grant in the world. Any other questions? No? I mean, we're just over on the stand, just over the left-hand side here. So if there is anything that you're thinking, well, I might want to ask it, but I feel stupid asking it, please come and ask us, because there's no such thing as a stupid question. But otherwise, that's me done.
Fantastic. Thank you. Please show your appreciation for Alan McCleave. Thank you, Alan.